I saw her in the reflection of my dead cell screen. Teachers normally kept their emotions behind a mask of indifference and stoicism. To see such a vulnerable expression was strange. Here was a human being. Funny to realize it only now, at the age of 17. The moment passed, and her reflection moved beyond the little rectangle on my lap. I continued resting my forehead against the edge of the desk, willing my phone to power up. Without music being fed to my earbuds, I could hear the thrum of the furnace against the wall, and something else. At first, I thought the kid next to me, also on his phone and intentionally deaf with seriously chunky headphones, was licking the interior of his dry mouth. When I snuck a glance, however, his lips were pressed together while he concentrated intensely on some sniper game. The noise changed anyway, getting louder before punctuating with a crack like snapping branches. Somebody across the room moaned, "Guh." A chair scraped and an impact caused a vibration in the floor. Normally, I wouldn't bother to respond to any stimulus because I'd be on my phone and listening to music. Tuning out sensations was the point. This time, however, I reluctantly snuck a peek, weirdly afraid of inviting interaction from a teacher. Let the keeners and the nerds have that, right? But no one else in the room had their heads up. Everyone posed exactly the same, bent over, staring at the screen in their lap. I can't remember the last time I actually observed other students in a classroom setting. Vaguely, I can sort of remember elementary and all the kids together, singing with a happy teacher. That was a long time ago, when I liked school. The licking, slobbering noise resumed below the horizon of graffiti desktops. A bloodied hand stuck up into view, holding something I couldn't immediately understand. The teacher's face followed and didn't appear sad anymore. She looked sated. With the back of her hand, she wiped the vitae dripping from her mouth. "Yes?" She caught my glance. I didn't know what to say. Quick as fuck, I stared at my lap again, at the dead phone. What the hell had Ms. What's-Her-Name done to some kid I never saw? "Yes," the teacher queried again with greater emphasis. I knew I was in some deep shit when she walked over. "Can I go to the bathroom?" I blurted. The trembling in my chin could not be suppressed. Her shirt and cardigan were splashed with blood. A trail of red dots went from her high heels to the kid she'd just murdered, whose body I couldn't see. Her perfume mixed with sweat. Killing that kid had been taxing. She exhaled sharply, close enough that her breath teased my hair. "What do I do? What do I do?" Screaming wouldn't do shit with everyone ensconced in their cushy technical addictions, the very place I wished I'd never left. At best, someone else's phone would die and they'd look up and maybe see a hand, the top of the teacher's head as she brutally tore me to pieces. This couldn't be real. Head bent over, I begged the universe for an escape. "What's that? A cell phone charger?" The teacher laughed. "You kids with your phones. Here." The end of a Chromebook charging cable appeared under my nose. This ought to work. Too scared to remove my hands from my thighs, I whimpered, "I really just need to go to the bathroom, miss." I'd been in her class for months. I still don't know her name. I'm sure she gave it the first day. Or maybe not. Maybe she saw us all listening to music and staring at our phones and smiled. "Go on," she said, "take it. That's it. Go back to praying for dopamine from the doom scroll." I hurriedly did as she suggested. I could feel her presence as the phone lit up. "Don't you dare stop praying," she whispered. "Or I'll have to call home and tell your parents the sad news, you never showed up today." In fact, there were a few kids missing. It was weird. "T-the-C cameras," I defended. I needed to do something. I knew. She couldn't let me walk away, knowing what I know. She laughed again, a disturbingly normal titter. I've a feeling they won't record anything amiss. The footage is regularly deleted. The quality is so poor, it's a joke, and dash. The phone restarted my music and it was loud. I didn't catch the rest of what she said. By the time I ripped out my earbuds, she'd already moved away. Yes, she asked severely, the fatal implication clear. And nothing. She nodded slowly and crossed her lips with a long index finger. I put my earbuds back in, bowed over, and drifted away into social media as God intended for this generation. What if I had an iPhone? I'd be dead. At first, it was kind of shocking she didn't care about letting me keep my phone. I could put something on social media, but who would see? How could anyone help before it was too late? I saw the stunned face of the murdered boy for a second as she dragged his body past my feet to somewhere. Then I understood the object that had been in her hand before, a human heart. The cracking bones had been his ribcage. She had the time and space to do surgery on the kid without anyone objecting whatsoever. The blood from her mouth suggested she'd done more than remove it. When the thrum of the bell burrowed through my audio, I got up and walked to the door without looking at anyone. That's why I almost bumped into the teacher. She gestured for me to remove my earbuds. "You had a good day," she said, and handed me a cheap-looking lollipop. "See you tomorrow." I tried to go around her. She stepped into my path. "Hold on. Aren't you going to open it?" Nobody else but us remained in the classroom. No sign of foul play except for a dot of red on the floor. There had been time to clean up the crime. The teacher watched as I struggled with the lollipop wrapper and finally put it in my mouth. It tasted bland, sugarless. In the process, I dropped an earbud on the floor. She beat me to picking it up. "You feel safe in there," she said, gesturing around her head, indicating the virtual world, "I suppose." "Yes," I squeaked. She examined the bud between thumb and forefinger. "Maybe because it is." "Yeah," I agreed, anything to get away. Cold sweat had collected around my tailbone. She must have noticed how much I trembled. Yet she only smiled. "Best to stay safe. Right?" I nodded, and she finally let me go. "You want to know why?" she asked as I stepped through the threshold. I froze. "No." "Look, I won't tell." "Who'd believe me?" "I won't tell." Dozens of students were in the hall. None of them could hear. They were experts at walking and watching content on their phones. "I know you won't tell," she said plainly, "because I'll fucking kill you if you do. I know your name. I know where you live. I know about your allergy to mosquitoes." Teachers have access to a lot of personal information. Not just about you either. "How's your sister doing?" "She has allergies too. A lot more severe than yours." "Why? What did we do to you?" I started to cry and she patted my shoulder, appearing easily as the caring teacher. I had no friends. I hadn't needed any. Only curious when your life is threatened, but what for? What's the point of you? Piglets, sitting around and consuming, she said bitterly. Her vibrant smile spread, a mask to scarcely contain her deep hatred. "Run along now. Science next, right? I'll allow you one look at your teacher there. Try not to let him see. Then you'll understand. You better understand. By the end of the period, you better understand. Now off you go." In the next class, I completed the extra credit assignment. Every student remained in a state of prayer once more. Who knew how many of them had just been in the previous class with me? The science teacher stood behind a lab table and stared out over our heads. He looked so lost and broken. Immediately, I turned up the volume on my music while I scrolled for something to make it all better. I understood. I understand. What I don't know, however, is how to cope with the stress of understanding without using the very thing that causes the problem. Probably, for sure, I'll pray about it. Turn up the music louder. And consume a little more. I'm not a thrill seeker. I spend most of my free time in a secluded comfort zone, usually in bed with my girlfriend. Having someone to love and hold is the only thing that doesn't make me feel cold anymore. I am grateful for it, truly, I am. Sleep has never been so good for me, and I can't imagine it ever will be if I lose this. Yet, there is no escaping some things. Not for me anyway. There are nights I wake up and remember it so clearly that I think, just for a moment, I return to that place beneath the ice. I can imagine the concrete ground, the thin walls, and the cold steel beams. I can hear the straining ceiling and the distant ruptures. I can only really make sense if I start at the beginning. For years ago, I went to the North Pole with a friend of mine, whom we will call Jake. Jake was the thrill seeker. He had the personality, not so much the funds, to pursue the next big thrill. Whenever he had enough cash to fund his latest impulse, he would spend it. It was no surprise to me, or anyone who knew him, that his relationships were often short-lived. He was attracted to the same kind of people, but impulsive people rarely hold on to their values. He was cheated on many times, and before you feel sorry for him, he cheated on women many times. Eventually, it reached a point where his friends could be counted on one hand. Against my better judgment, I was one of those friends. He called me up one day to tell me about this big opportunity to see polar bears in northern Canada. I was interested. Spending all my life in England, I never went further in this world than Scotland, which turned out to be as equally miserable as the city I was living in. I had free days I wanted to take advantage of, and my life just felt like it was going nowhere. In short, I was feeling weak and impulsive. It didn't take much convincing for me to bite the bullet. Jake screwed up most of his life, but at least he had some good photos to show for it. I needed something like that to look back on, even if it filled me with regret. Screw it, I said as I FaceTimed him. Let's go see some polar bears. Hell yeah, Jake said. We leave tomorrow. What? I need to get tickets. All covered. A guy I met will fly us there, only a small stop in Greenland, then we will bounce to Canada. Or skip, whatever. Pack warm, but pack light. Oh, shit, I think I have some clean clothes. When will you pick me up? About 2 a.m, Jaxie said, as if that didn't make my heart drop already. Plane leaves at 3:30, so, yeah. Asterisk. Taking the cheap, easy route isn't always legal. The less said about the flight arrangements, the better. I just trusted the fact that nobody would check our passports when we arrived, and luckily, they didn't. I guess if you know people, there are a lot of things that are never checked or recorded. One thing I knew for sure, I would be going back the usual way. The plane we were in was like a small mail plane. Just boxes of envelopes and hard cases. It was also cold. No proper insulation, no proper seats. We spent our flight shaking in blankets that Jake's friend gave us. Once off the plane, we were guided through the small airport until we made it into the town itself. Free and ready to find transport to our first destination. I let Jake guide me the whole way, and I will say this much, he knew how to make it look like it was all planned. We found a nice place to stay, we saw the polar bears, and we saw beautiful mountains and forests. I guess I never really knew anything about Canada. I just imagined cold, gray cities with cold, gray people. Nah, that's Eastern Europe, he told me. Canada is great. Good food, friendly people, beautiful country, if you go to the right places. Speaking of which, I said as I looked through the photos I took at the Polar Bear Reserve. Where to after this? I have 2 more free days until I have to go back to work. Can't you call in sick after that? There's still time to warm up in Mexico, mi amigo. Jake, poor favor, no more sketchy flights. Let's just make the most of tomorrow, then let's head home, okay? There's nothing really in range, you know? I mean, we could try ice fishing in this cabin my old girlfriend has. Ah, better still, we can rent some snowboards, go to the dash. I will take the ice fishing, thank you. Asterisk. It was chaos. Not being locals, we didn't pay attention to warning signs or the news. We rented a truck with these chains wrapped around the tires and started our journey towards the cabin. The weather was ballistic and visibility was low. The whole time I was worrying if we would ever make it back to the town we left, let alone the cabin. Jake tried to stay upbeat about it, but it was clear he was worried as well. We turned off real roads onto a dirt path through the forest, but that too was getting covered in thick snow. We listened to the radio, mostly country rock, which would only be played in lousy bars. It did little to ease my nerves. I just kept refreshing the news portion on my phone, hoping a connection would get through. We should be there soon, Jake said with a smile, turning the truck just in time to avoid a tree. I recognize this area. So do I muttered. I've been seeing snow-covered forest for the past 20 minutes. My words must have started it. Light sarcasm to break the karma camel's back. The truck continued for a few more seconds, then there was this sudden, lurching drop. The side of the trick I was on dipped noticeably, then rose before it ground to a halt. I looked at Jake and he looked at me. I sat back as he tried to get the truck to keep going, but it was beached on something and the ground was too slippery. It needed all 4 wheels on the ground and the back left tire. We both got out of the truck, the sheer wind cutting through our jackets as we walked to the back and examined the large rock. It was jagged, its point pressing against the frame, but not by much. Just need a little lift and it will get off, I said. A careful lift, Jake clarified. I didn't pay the insurance. Why do you care? You didn't show them any ID and paid in cash. I actually did show them my ID. It was necessary, you know? Jake looked at me nervously. My face felt that much colder. What happened to not leaving a paper trail? I questioned him. There wasn't any time to shout at him. We had to get the truck off the rock. Luckily, the rental place didn't just give us chain-bound tires, which seemed to be clumped up with snow, but they also had a tool kit in the back of the truck. I took the largest piece of metal, a pry bar, and wedged it between the rock and truck frame. With as much patience as I could muster, I told Jake to pump the accelerator a little so the truck didn't roll back. Being squashed by the red behemoth was the last thing I wanted. So, that's what we did. Being as strong as I was, I lifted the truck just enough that the 2 front wheels were able to pull the truck forward. The weight slipped off the pry bar so suddenly that I almost fell forward. The truck dropped, the frame hit the tip of the rock but bounced forward. Out of sheer fear, I stumbled back. The brutal crunch of that metal on rock made my heart jump. I saw the truck on all 4 tires as I stumbled back. I think I even heard Jake's whooping over the roar of the storm. As my ass hit the ground, I felt an emptiness to my right. I tried to place my hand there, thinking there was ground to keep me steady, but all I did was shirt my weight the wrong way. I fell into darkness. I heard the whistle of wind above me, but also the rush around my ears as I fell. I heard the clattering of metal. The pry bar fell with me. A dull thunk. My leg hit something, causing me to twist. Then I hit the ground. All of this happened in the space of a few seconds. Each second I was in such shock I didn't react. And then I couldn't. Asterisk. I woke up to a shooting pain in my right leg that seemed to run up my side as well. My head didn't feel sore, but it wasn't easy getting up either. It felt like my insides were just one fragile piece of pasta, waiting for that pressure to make it all snap. Yet, I willed myself to sit up and look around, as well as remind myself to breathe. With that first painful inhale, my teeth ached and my tongue was dry. When my eyes adjusted to the darkness, I saw I was in a tunnel. The walls and ceiling curved into each other, making this half-moon shape against the flat, concerted ground. Steel struts added to the support and separated the rooms that diverged away from the tunnel I was in. I saw lights far ahead, a glowing speck in the distance. I instinctively reached for my pocket to get my cell phone to use the flashlight, but that was nowhere to be found. I recalled leaving it in the truck to charge. I sat there for a moment, energy fast returning, but all of it focused on my growing panic. I had fallen. I could see the hole in the roof above, but I couldn't see the surface. Water droplets dripped onto and around me. In a hoarse voice, I called up but received no response. I couldn't even hear the blizzard. What I did hear was creaking and cracking. The panic told me to stand up. My foot bumped the pry bar that fell with me. I picked it up and started walking towards the distant light. The whole tunnel seemed to make those unsettling noises, but otherwise, it was silent. My footsteps were the only accompaniment. My eyes searched the darkness for something as I walked, my logic-bound mind seeking something that could help me, like a phone. When I couldn't see one, I started inventing reasons for the tunnel I was in. Old subway? It didn't look like one. Part of the infrastructure, like a sewer or electrical thing? No, that was crazy. It looked too good for either of those. Old war bunker? I doubt the Canadians built something so large during the war. After who knows how many minutes, I heard something collapse and it shook the tunnel. Looking back, I could make out concrete falling and steel struts snapping and buckling right where I sat. The tunnel was struggling and losing. Section by section, it was caving in towards me. I wasn't slow to start. I ran for my life. I don't know how movies could get the sensation so wrong. You don't have time to scream and run. You could only do one effectively, and obviously, it was the latter. I ran until I reached the light, the collapse only increasing in speed, catching up to me. I tried to turn the corner sharply, but I only ended up slipping. My head bounced off the ground and fear pushed me to my feet again as I ran down a lit tunnel. The collapse reached the corner, but that's where it stopped. When the ground no longer shook, when that rumble faded, I looked back to see the wave of dust settle. The way back was gone. I was standing in a new section of the tunnel, which was much more like a maze of hospital hallways. The fact the lights were on made me hopeful, but not as much as a green exit sign hanging from the ceiling in one hallway. Sweating, I took off my huge puffy jacket and folded it under my arm. With the pry bar in my other hand, I started my fast walk towards the way out. Asterisk. I drank from a water cooler. The dust and cobwebs that covered it told me how long the place had been abandoned, yet the lights told me that it still had power. Did those who built the place forget about it? Or was there some long-lasting backup power system? I passed by several empty offices, labs, and even surgery rooms with weird observation rooms above them. I know now that it's common for students and even family members to observe a surgery, but I was thinking of something else at that moment. And when I say these rooms were empty, I mean it. A desk, a few shelves, some tables and hospital bed frames, and no mattresses were all that filled the space. There is only one exception: the rooms I couldn't get into. There were these keycard-protected doors, with some heavy-duty bars braced against them. Bolts kept those doors together, not screws. On everyone was a gas mask symbol. Airtight chambers for different kinds of experiments, I guess. While I searched, I continued to hear the groan of the pressure above. At least it sounded much more stable, so I didn't have to worry about a mountain falling on top of me. My only concern was how long it took me to reach the exit. I kept following the signs. I wasn't going in circles, the rooms to my sides were different. I tried to not let my imagination play tricks on me. Like making sounds that weren't there, or that I saw people, maybe even a head, staring at me from around a distant corner. That seemed to happen a lot more than I cared to admit. What settled my thoughts was an obstacle. A door with chains, but not on my side. I could see through a narrow window the heavy chains that kept the handle in place, the massive lock that was used. I opened the door as much as I could. It was just enough to fit my pry bar. I looked around. The sound of the metal echoed, but I didn't see anything. The hallway to my left, empty. The hallway to the right, empty. The hallway I came from had a single flickering light, and a few of those rooms I couldn't open, but it was empty too. I dug the pry bar and tried to find a good position to use it. I made the mistake of trying some sort of levering to snap a chain, but what worked was twisting it into a tight position first, then prying at a single link. It still took a while and I worked up a sweat, but the link broke. Gravity pulled the chains down with a clatter. I pulled the door open and stepped into a stairwell. I was at the top. The exit sign was pointing down. No, I remembered the word escaping my lips. That was the first thing that didn't make sense to me. Why would the exit be deeper into the facility? I didn't think about it for too long. It was still the only way I could see, so I took it. I started my journey down the steps. I passed several keycard-protected doors on my way down, nothing that I could open. With each one I saw, I was afraid that the exit would be behind another keycard-protected door. My descent was gradual enough that I could let those worries slip to the back of my mind. I would say it was close to 50 levels below where I started when the lights turned off. I didn't notice the hum of the facility until it stopped. In darkness, I had to use the glow-in-the-dark strips on the ground and walls to keep me from stumbling. I could still see the keycard-protected doors, their card reader screens still running on some kind of backup power, because they were lit even then. I was approaching one when I saw the screen shift for a brief second to a green tone before going black. Before power ran out completely, a mechanical sound could be heard and there was the sound of the seal around the door being broken. The door shifted open slightly as the seal broke but went no further. My heart was pounding. The door appeared so much darker, the yellow gas mask symbol looking a lot more threatening. I became painfully aware of how loud my steps were when I heard something shift beyond the door. My mouth was open, my breath halted right at the start of my throat. I didn't want to be found, I didn't want to be heard. I didn't feel alone anymore. My jacket made a sound I didn't like, so I put it down, abandoning it completely. While I was kneeling, I also took off my shoes and continued forward in socks. I held my shoes in my left hand, while my right hand held the pry bar like a club. I passed by several more doors, some regular, but locked. I didn't reach the bottom before I found a door with a green exit sign above it, the words themselves glowing in the dark. I looked through the vertical window and saw a glimmer of light. I reached for the handle and pulled it open, no locks. I stepped into a subway system, although a lot smaller. There was no mistaking why I was looking at a train, a tunnel, and even the crappy tiles that covered most subway walls and pillars. The train sat there, empty, with the doors open, but its lights were on. I breathed a sigh. Click. It was the smallest sound. The sound of a door being pushed just a little before the frame stopped it. I turned around to look at the door, more specifically, the window in the middle of the door. A face pressed against the glass, too dark to identify even with the lights from the train. Yet, I could see its eyes, and those eyes told me that it wasn't human. Reflective, like that of some kind of predator. Those eyes were so glossy, yet murky, they reminded me of a fish's eyes. I took one step back, my breathing halted by shock now. I whined as I coughed to breathe. My body never struggled that much to function since I was a kid. It got a lot worse when the creature hit the door. It wanted to get through. I count myself as one of the luckiest guys in history, and the door was one of those push-pull doors. The sound of its strikes grew louder, encouraging me to move faster as I ran towards the train. Once inside, I saw that the seats and everything were bare minimum. Public transport looked better than what I was standing in. I ignored the fact it reminded me of the plane I shivered in to get to Canada and just ran towards the controls at the front. The driver's seat was a basic metal chair with a set of flick button controls, levers, and a number system I didn't understand. I played with the dial and the number changed, counting up and down, the lowest being 5 and the highest being 55. I was panicking, my hand dancing above the controls, not sure what to do. I heard something breaking. I don't know if it was the door or the frame it was attached to. I just knew that whatever was beyond it was out. I saw a button with the door symbols. I pushed it and watched the train doors shut. The soft sound of the rubber seals meeting was comforting, but not the sound of fleshy thumps hitting the doors. I turned back to the controls, scanning them again, then noticing a paper stuck to the wall. It was an information stick, mostly torn and rubbed away. I saw rows and scratched out names and numbers. Only one remained, a set of numbers saying 45. It was all I had, so I trusted my life to it. I played with the dial until the number said 45. I then started pulling levers and pushing buttons. I found more buttons on the side of the panel as well. I was cautious about some, but the sound of glass breaking pushed me to take a chance on them. The train hummed to life and then lurched forward. When I turned around, I saw the door closest to me shaking, being slowly pried open. I dropped my shoes and approached it with my pry bar. Hands curled around the inside of the sliding doors, if they could be called hands. It was like a pair of talons, too dark, bone-like hooks for fingers. With the realization that I was going to die if I didn't do something, I lifted the pry bar and started beating on the claws. I heard a scream, bird-like. It reminded me of an eagle. It was being drowned out by the sound of the train's grinding wheels. The train sounded like it was struggling. I didn't have time to address it. The door opened a little wider and an entire arm thrust inside and reached for me. One of the claws scratched the back of my hand. It was trying to grab for me, and hitting it with the pry bar didn't work. I shifted the position in my hand and brought the jagged part down towards its forearm. The metal wasn't razor sharp, but still sharp enough to break the scaled skin of the creature. The screeching scream was much louder and it withdrew its arm. I turned back to the controls, trying to make sense of why the train wasn't going any faster. I then noticed a lever that wasn't all the way up. Pushing it, I realized it was the brake lever and the train sped up. I heard thumps all along the train going towards the back and small screams all the way. I tried catching my breath. The only sounds I heard were that of the train charging onward. I looked back at the controls and saw that small metal slides shifted into place, locking levers and hiding buttons. A digital screen above the dial lit up with the words, "Destination set." I sat down on the ground and everything hit me at once. I yelled to let it all out until I was left with small cries that bubbled up with my breathing. I just felt tiny. I was tired, hungry, and sore. Those small cries were my only relief. Asterisk. It was a long train ride, a few days. I found a trash box at the end of the train, which contained mostly little, but I found a couple of bottles that still had water and stale soda and then one orange soda bottle that was half full. It tasted awful. It made me feel a little sick, but I was desperate. I tried stopping, but it was impossible. I would break the controls before I got them to do what I wanted. I could wait and hope that I was still alive when it stopped. When it finally did, I didn't dare touch any other controls than the one that opened the doors. I stepped out and saw what appeared to be the same station I left days before. I approached a push-pull door, pushing it open, and saw a set of stairs. I climbed the stairs, not seeing any sealed doors. I kept going to the top, following a dark hallway until I came to a set of doors locked with chains. I used the pry bar, the end of which was stained with a black gunk, to break a link. More hallways, more doors, and a feeling of dread settling in my stomach. I then breathed what had to be fresh air. I had climbed another set of stairs, then a ladder, finally opening some kind of trap door that was left ajar. My hands touched sand, dry grass, and rocks, but mostly sand. I climbed out into an open desert, the night sky practically shining compared to the dark I had to trudge through. I saw a distant car driving away a road. I walked towards it. I walked and walked until I was following the road. Asterisk. I woke up in the bed I sleep in now. A woman, a brother, and her mother found me on the side of the road. A true, honest, loving family that nursed me to health, and I didn't understand a word they said. They spoke Spanish. I was in Mexico. The train took me to Mexico. No wonder it took so many days. And here I have remained for the past 4 years. I learned the language, mostly from the woman who found me. We grew close. Close enough to make me want to stay instead of returning home, then so close that I never wanted to leave. I contacted Jake and told him I was still alive. He visited me to make sure it was me. Technically, I shouldn't be here, but I shouldn't have been in Canada, the Arctic, or that underground facility either. I am happy here. I'm happier than I was in dreary England, although I do sometimes miss it. I'm leaving this experience with you. Maybe with it out there, someone else can take it off of me. Maybe just talking about it like this will be enough to help me escape those nightmares. After leaving the military at the age of 23, I felt lost and confused. I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, though I knew I never wanted to end up in a cubicle prison, typing away at a computer day after day. I scoured the job postings, looking for something exciting. I thought of maybe being a police officer, as I had experience in the MP while I was in the Army. Then I saw the posting for the FBI. After that, my life would change forever. After a few years working there, I had been invited to join the elite homicide unit, tasked with tracking down the worst of the worst across the entire country. This was the same unit that had helped track down the Green River Killer after decades and over 100 bodies. It was the same unit that helped bring down BTK and the original Night Stalker many years after the cases seemed to have gone cold. My supervising officer had brought me into his office. There, I saw a muscular man with colorless eyes as cold and blue as a glacier. His head was shaved, his skin slightly tanned, and he seemed to constantly grit his teeth, as if he was doing his best to restrain himself from violence at every moment. "This man will help train you on the job now that you've finished your training," my supervisor said as he sat behind his desk. My supervisor's face reminded me of a hawk's, all angles and lines with a straight, prominent nose like a giant beak in the center. "His name's Agent Stone. Don't worry, you're in good hands." I sat in the passenger seat of the unmarked black sedan as Agent Stone drove us out of there, briefing me on the case. "We're dealing with one sick bastard here," he said as he drove through the small downtown area of the village, past a local pizza shop, a liquor store, and a pathetic gas station. With a few random houses scattered around them, that was the entirety of Scarville's downtown. They call him the Moonlight Ripper because he only kills when the moon is shining. If it is cloudy or rainy or a new moon, he won't come out. As far as we know, all of his murders have been in this area. In fact, all of them have been in this very town. The town of Scarville. Maybe we're dealing with a werewolf? I said jokingly, but Agent Stone's face remained grim. He turned the car down a side street filled with thick woods on both sides of us. Maybe, he responded noncommittally. I think it may be some occult thing, but it's hard to make a profile based on the limited amount of evidence we've gathered so far. We just got a call from the state troopers that more bodies were discovered by some mushroom hunters way out in the middle of nowhere, though, so perhaps we'll have more evidence for a profile soon. And I use the term body loosely here, as you'll see. The latest crime scene is down this road about 10 miles. Their mouths, and a couple of victims even showed signs of tearing in their vocal cords from screaming for so long, if you believe our coroner. But that's far from the worst of it. The rest of it, I guess you'll have to see for yourself. Agent Stone parked the sedan on the side of the road as the light faded and the sun spilled its rusty blood over the hills. An empty police car from the Scarville Sheriff's Department was already parked on the side of the road, its lights turned off. I pulled out my flashlight, shining it all around to get a better sense of the place. Scarville was a town with seemingly endless woods and dirt roads that wound their way like snakes through the rolling hills. There was a small, curving dirt trail that led through thick boughs of evergreens near the police car. The trail was so inconspicuous and overgrown with weeds that anyone driving past who didn't know it was there would almost certainly miss it. The pathway curved into the dark forest and disappeared from view. It had a sinister feeling to it, and the fact that this would have been the pathway traveled by the victims before their torture and murder added another layer of horror to this place. Agent Stone went first, his heavy body trampling through the overgrown path with a swishing of leaves and a snapping of branches. I followed close behind, keeping my head on a swivel as I constantly looked around. I had the sensation of being watched, the feeling of many glittering eyes peeking out from the forest. "Hello?" Agent Stone called out towards the crime scene. "This is the FBI. We're here for the investigation." His voice echoed back eerily in the dying light, but we heard no response. The night had fully descended on the world like a blanket of shadows by the time we reached the end of the winding path. It opened up onto a grassy field that stretched upwards on the hill. We shone our flashlights towards the center of the field, and about 30 feet in front of us, I saw something I'll never forget. I couldn't tell how many victims there were here. At first, it only looked like a mass of dismembered arms, legs, heads, and torsos. The bodies were relatively fresh, and I could tell that the victims were a variety of races. I caught glimpses of white victims, black victims, and possibly Asian victims. I also both genders represented in the circle of gore. "Equal opportunity killer," I muttered, and Agent Stone nodded. "Reminds me of Richard Ramirez," he said. "I bet we'll find both men and women victims in that pile." One of the Moonlight Ripper's victims was even a child in the last crime scene. I remembered the pictures I had seen of the last crime scene with revulsion. The body of a child had been crucified in an abandoned cabin next to a pond. The blood of his mother had been used to draw occult symbols on the wall all around him. As we moved closer to the pile of gore and dismembered limbs, my flashlight started to show a cohesive picture to the organization of the victims. The bouncing beams illuminated a circle formed of bent arms and legs around the outside. Inside the circle was an upside-down pentagram formed of torsos and limbs. A decapitated goat head had been placed in the center, and 5 more heads were placed outside at each of the points where the upside-down star intersected with the circle. "It's a Baphomet," I said as the picture suddenly came into view. "A fucking Baphomet." Agent Stone shook his head in disgust. I just continued to stare in wonder. It seemed like so much energy and time to go through, and for what? For a display piece in a grassy field that only a couple mushroom hunters and the police would ever see? A Baphomet? That's not surprising, Agent Stone said. As if we needed more evidence that this killer is a true Satanist, one of the rare ones who actually believes in Satan as a true, divine entity and not a symbol. We knew that from the first crime scene. Where's that goddamn cop? He looked around quickly, as if expecting to see him slinking out of the dark woods behind us. Why is it we always seem to get the most incompetent, fat, idiot cops when we come out to the sticks? It's all that defund the police bullshit, I answered. None of them have any training or money. People seem to think that making a police force of entirely ineffectual idiots will somehow make them safer. But no one ever said Americans were smart. He laughed, but it sounded harsh and strained. Agent Stone looked pale and, suddenly, much older. He was hunched over, and I saw his hands were trembling. We put on gloves and approached the pile of bodies. The sightless eyes of the heads seemed to stare at me as we crept closer to the circle. Behind us, we heard soft footsteps. I looked back and saw two technicians from the FBI walking calmly out of the trail. They wore special coverings on their shoes as well as masks and hairnets. They didn't want to risk their saliva or hair contaminating the crime scene, if possible at least not until it had been thoroughly scoured for clues. The one in the lead, a tall, blonde girl, came forward. Behind her stood another technician, a younger, nerdy-looking guy with thick glasses. "Leanne, you're here already?" Agent Stone asked, raising an eyebrow. "Did you guys see a goddamn cop anywhere when you came up here?" "There's a police car out there, but he wasn't in it. He wasn't here securing the crime scene either." The nerdy guy shrugged. Leanne shook her head. "I haven't seen anyone besides you two," Leanne said, her voice sounding distant and muffled through the mask she wore. The two technicians moved up to the crime scene and began gathering evidence. As I watched, I saw a slight gleam from inside the go-ahead at the center. "Hey, what's that?" I said. Leanne looked up as the other technician kept brushing for fingerprints and taking samples. I pointed at the go-ahead with its wide-open eyes, the peak of a blue tongue poking out through its rubbery lips. "It's inside the mouth." I saw something shiny. Leanne nodded as she bent down and carefully tried to pry the jaw open. Rigor mortis had set in, and for a second, she seemed to struggle. Then it opened and something slid out onto the grass below. It was only about the size of a deck of cards. It looked golden black. Leanne picked it up with her gloved hand before turning to give me a grave look. "It's a police badge," she said. "A police badge from the Scarville Sheriff's Department. Covered in blood." It was more than that. I saw ripped-off fingernails sticking to the badge, wet and dripping. From the nearby thick brush about 20 feet to our right, we heard an eerie, ear-splitting scream. It sounded electronically amplified, almost like there were hisses and distortions in that scream. It resonated all around us, as if a woman were being burned alive. All four of us froze in our tracks, staring in that direction. Agent Stone and I had our service pistols out immediately. "Is that a fox?" Leanne whispered from behind us. The other technician just shook his head. "That's no damn fox. We've got them all around my place and they don't sound like that." "They're not that loud either," he said. "It sounds like a banshee." "Fuck it," Agent Stone said, glancing over at me and motioning forward with his head. "Let's go check it out." Slowly, we made our way towards the perimeter of the field. The field itself was rectangular. From the way we had come, we could see the grass disappearing into the distance, but it was only 60 or 70 feet wide. Agent Stone pushed brush aside as he shone his flashlight. We trampled into the dark forest, though it was difficult going. Prickers grabbed at us like clawed hands, and small tree branches whacked me in the face. We had tangles of ferns and bushes blocking our view, but I saw something there. It almost looked like a giant, toothless mouth in the midst of all this green life. It was formed in the shape of an oval. "Holy shit, a cave!" Agent Stone exclaimed, and I realized at once that he was right. It had a thin, barely noticeable deer trail winding its way towards the mouth. The stone of the cave looked as brown as polished mahogany. The odor of fresh blood and sweat traveled toward us on the light, springtime breeze. Laid across the threshold, I beheld a naked corpse. It was about the height of a man. To my horror, I realized it was totally skinned. The gleaming muscle and dripping veins underneath looked garish and wet. The sound of drops of blood hitting the sands of the cave seemed to keep time, almost like a water clock. "Holy fuck," Agent Stone whispered. I could feel my heart racing in my chest. We kept moving forward until we stood only a few steps from the skinned, bloody corpse. That was the moment that the body moved. "Guh, guh. God, kill me," it whispered through its lipless mouth as its red hands clenched into fists. "Who are you?" Agent Stone whispered. "I came here, hour ago. My name—" "Trooper Shaw," he slowly gurgled, needing to stop constantly. Blood bubbled from his mouth as he hyperventilated. Got in the direction of the pile of mutilated corpses. Agent Stone and I looked back and then further down the tunnel. "What the hell is going on right now?" he whispered. "Someone's shooting and some banshees coming. And from what I can tell, we're right in the middle of it." "We need to deal with the shooter first," I said, turning to leave. "We can always come back to this cave. But Trooper Shaw is as good as dead. There's nothing we can do unless you want to put him out of his misery." Agent Stone didn't meet my eyes as we walked away. Swearing and cursing, Agent Stone and I crept through the brush. We peeked out and saw an old man standing towards the top of the Baphomet, his wrinkled face peering in our direction. He looked ancient, the countless lines on his face giving him a drooping appearance. He was small and hunched over. If I had seen him on the street, I would have thought him one of the least intimidating figures I had ever seen. His face reminded me of an old bloodhound ready for the needle. But, under the cold streams of moonlight, I noticed something sinister about the old man. It appeared that his eyes were glowing. They had currents of something silvery and pale swirling inside them, currents like moonlight spinning in the sky. In his hands, I saw a black rifle. He held it loosely, almost lazily, his silvery orbs of eyes constantly flicking over the forest. The body of the male technician lay outside the opposite end of the circle from the old man. The technician had been shot in the face, and what was left didn't look like much more than raw hamburger meat and bone splinters. His body had been staged. His arms pointing towards the Baphomet almost looked like an arrow. Agent Stone and I only crouched there for the briefest moment, taking this all in, but it was a moment too long. Without warning, the old man tensed and swung the rifle in our direction. He must have caught a glimpse of us with his strange, animal eyes. He opened fire. I knew that the soft body armor the FBI gave us for typical field work would do nothing to stop a high-caliber rifle round. The cacophony of the gunshots and the flashes of light sent Agent Stone and I into action at once. We hit the ground. I felt countless prickers slicing into my body. After a few moments, the firing stopped. I felt something long and hairy with far too many legs crawl over my face. I gave a muffled cry of terror, instantly wiping at my forehead. A skittering, black centipede clung there. "Stay quiet," Agent Stone hissed, but it was too late. The gunfire started up again, and this time, the bullets were hitting much closer. We both tried to crawl away, staying as low as possible. All around us, Branches exploded and pieces of bark splintered as high-caliber bullets ripped them apart like cotton candy. Bullets whined past our heads, smashing into the ground and sending up clouds of dirt. I took out my radio, praying. This is Agent Harper and Agent Stone. We're in Scarville at the crime scene off of Asmodeus Road. We have an active shooter and need immediate backup. I repeat, shots fired, shots fired. Send immediate air support and extra units, I whispered. The gunshots had stopped again, pausing for a brief moment. Everything had gone deathly silent. Then my radio squawked. Roger that. Help is on the way, agents. Hold tight and maintain your position, a soft, female voice said through the radio. Agent Stone and I winced as the noise rang out. I had lost my flashlight during the shooting, and Agent Stone had turned his off, so we couldn't see more than a few feet in front of our noses. But I heard light footsteps crunching through the brush nearby. The person on the radio couldn't do any more for us, so I put it away. A few moments later, the rifle shots started again. I repressed an urge to scream as waves of adrenaline shook my body. Agent Stone and I tried returning fire through the thick brush separating us from the old man, but I had no idea if I was even close to hitting him. The old man would immediately return fire, the rifle bullets smashing through the surrounding woods like a juggernaut. Agent Stone and I kept crawling in a parallel direction to the shooter, trying to change our positions constantly so as to keep the shooter guessing where we were. Where's Leanne? I asked through gritted teeth. Did you see her? Is she dead? Agent Stone just shook his head. I couldn't see much, he whispered. I saw the body of the other guy, though. He's a goner for sure. Hopefully Leanne ran away. Come out and surrender, right now, or I'll kill this bitch, the old man screamed in a harsh voice. I glanced through the nearest bush and saw him pointing the rifle at his feet. I could barely see her, but I caught a glimpse of blonde hair past the other dismembered bodies forming the Baphomet. Leanne didn't appear to be moving, though. I wondered if she was already dead. Fuck that, Agent Stone whispered. I'm not going out there. We need to take him out before he kills the hostage. Keep moving. Maybe we should try a pincer movement, I whispered back. One of us on each side shooting. Behind us, we heard a gurgling scream coming from the cave. Something huge and black with a body like a praying mantis came skittering out in a blur. It held the skin form of Trooper Shaw in its reptilian pincers. Shaw continued to writhe and kick with the last of his dying energy. Fresh rivers of blood flowed from his chest where the creature held him. Its 8-jointed legs swept over the forest floor as silently as a light breeze. It had bulbous eyes that shimmered with rainbows like oil spots. Its armor was chitinous and thick, yet flowed smoothly around its many twisting joints. I heard a wretched, repulsive sucking sound as it drank the blood from Trooper Shaw's seizing body. Trooper Shaw's eyes had rolled up in his head, and I heard a death gasp bubble from his lips. The Vrikalakas and their beast must come back up from the underworld to feed, the old man screamed with insanity. Come to us. We have left you offerings of blood and meat. Come to the feeding. I wanted to run, but we were surrounded. If I ran back, the mantis creature would run me down. If I ran forward, then I would likely be killed by a rifle bullet. Agent Stone glanced over at me and shook his head. We stayed where we were, as still as statues, and we waited for what would happen next. The mantis creature shook its massive head, spraying Trooper Shaw's blood all over the trees and bushes. With a last sucking sound, it dropped the still corpse on the leaves. Its body looked like it had expanded slightly and turned from a deepest black like oblivion into a more reddish-black hue. The mantis creature's head angled to the side as it regarded the old man, as if it were asking a question. It stared across the woods with its strange rainbow eyes. I heard it sniff the air with powerful lungs. It gave a shriek, the shrieking of a banshee, the screaming of a woman being burned alive. Hearing it so close sent goosebumps dancing all over my skin. Shivers ran down my back. The mantis creature ran forward towards the old man. I sat up and peeked around a bush, trying to get a shot while he was distracted. Agent Stone had the same idea. As the enormous mantis monster lowered its head towards the dismembered limbs, we opened fire. The old man fell with a grunt. I saw a spray of blood, but I didn't know if the wound was fatal. Leanne apparently chose that time to regain consciousness. I saw a blonde head rise suddenly up, her wide, frightened eyes meeting the gaze of the creature. Its massive pincers clicked faster with a sound like bones snapping as it slunk forward. It advanced on Leanne as she tried to crawl away on all fours. Its rainbow eyes gleamed with hunger. The old man was groaning and dragging himself across the grass, still alive. I glanced over at Agent Stone. "We have to do something," I cried. He nodded, raising his pistol at the creature. I followed suit, and together, we opened fire, even knowing it might draw the abomination to us. The first of the bullets hit its hard shell with a crack. Its enormous eyes turned to look in our direction, its head ratcheting in a blur. Within moments, I realized our plan had worked. The abomination forgot all Leanne and charged directly at me and Agent Stone. "Fuck!" Agent Stone cried, throwing himself to the side. I fled in the opposite direction. The mantis creature came down on us like a runaway train. Massive branches splintered and trees cracked in its wake. I felt the hard thudding of its jointed, alien legs as it skittered hungrily at me. I crawled under bushes with my heart pounding in my chest, not daring to look back. I had almost made it to the edge of the clearing when my foot got caught on a root. I went flying forwards, my head smacking hard into a tree. My vision turned white for a long moment as I lay on the forest floor, stunned. I heard the approach of heavy feet. I raised my head, seeing the black mantis creature turning gracefully in my direction. I knew, at that moment, that I was going to die. Inhaling deeply, I raised the pistol and fired at its face, but the pistol rounds wouldn't penetrate its thick shell. I tried hitting it in the eyes, but it was a rapidly moving target in a dark setting and I missed every time. Most of the shots hit in the torso, where its chitinous shell seemed to be thickest. "Help me!" I screamed. "Someone!" And those would have been my last words, if it weren't for Leanne. As the mantis creature got within 10 feet of me, a deafening gunshot rang out. The side of its head exploded, sending out a shower of fresh red blood that mixed with some dark, oily fluid dripping down its head. It staggered forward a few more steps before falling, skidding forwards like a horse with a broken leg. It tried to scream, to give one final banshee wail, but it came out distorted and weak. As it died, it gurgled, and its rainbow eyes continued to stare sightlessly through me. Unbeknownst to me, as Leanne would tell us later, she had been fighting with the old man. One of our bullets had caught him in the right shoulder, shattering it and leaving a gaping exit wound. Even still, he had fought ferociously, and she had been forced to kick him in the face a couple dozen times before she could get the rifle away from him. He tried to raise it and fire at her, but she was too quick. She had taken the AR-15 from the old man and shot a round directly into the center of the creature's head. If she had been a half-second slower, or a slightly less accurate shot, I know without a doubt I would be dead right now. Agent Stone and I went to the old man, looking down at him with disgust. We had caught the serial killer, at least, the one they called the Moonlight Ripper. "Why'd you do this?" Agent Stone asked, his face grim and set. "Why did you kill these people? Just to drag some prehistoric monster out of the caves?" The old man shook his head. He looked pale and weak, and sweat covered his face despite the cool temperature. There are endless tunnels under the town of Scarville, cities from the lost civilizations where strange things still live. As a child, I met them. I met them when they attacked us during the Battle of Scarville. I lost my parents that day, and I lost a portion of my humanity, I think. For I got some of that blood of the vampires in my mouth, and ever since, I've been different from other people, he said. I just wanted to see them again. They're my family now. I thought the offerings would bring them up, but it only brought the beast. A few minutes later, reinforcements started to arrive, but they weren't from the FBI. They all wore identical black suits and had automatic rifles slung around their shoulders. When I asked them what federal or law enforcement agency they represented, they just laughed and told me they were from the cleaners, whatever that means. They took the injured old man away in an ambulance, his eyes still glowing with that eerie white light as he stared at me. Some of the cleaners went with him, cuffing him to the table and guarding him with automatic rifles. They loaded the mantis creature's body into a large armored van to fill in the cave entrance. But when the time comes, I doubt it will help. Because the town of Scarville has many caves and many entrances, and they won't fill them all.